If an atmosphere is sustained long enough, it becomes a climate. And if a climate is sustained long enough, it attracts a culture. I'm from Florida. Florida's had a certain atmosphere for long enough that has created a predictable climate that draws or attracts a certain culture. Beach and sun. You don't go to Illinois for a beach vacation. You go to Colorado, you know it's going to be cold. You look for skiers and snow. You don't look for the beach. The reason that we push you to come to prayer on Tuesday night, the reason that we push you to be here on Sundays, to be here on Thursdays, because even in the church, what happens on a constant basis creates an atmosphere that creates a climate that attracts a culture. We see it all the time. That's why some churches are known as a church of prayer. Some churches are known as the music church. When you say Bethel music, no one really knows that there's a Bethel church. Bethel music. Traditional, conservative, energetic. However, the culture begins to attract. Also, fussing and fighting. There are some churches that have had such trouble that it's become their culture that all they can attract is trouble. Here's the thing. On a weekly basis, we have people that come to our services, and we are so blessed. They meet and have an encounter with God. Some are healed, some are saved, some are filled with the Spirit. Some just come to the altar and something happens and they begin to cry and they begin to seek the Lord, and something is lifted off their shoulders, and it's like they can't express or explain what God is doing. And it's like they come to the altar and it's like an instant, there's something, I don't use the word magical but yes, something magical about it. Something unbelievable. We come to the church and we come into His presence, and it's like we come in so burdened and broken and wore down, and all of a sudden the music begins to play, and it's almost like somebody reaches down and picks it off of us, and we're like, woo! It's amazing. It's amazing. But here's the deal. On the way home, before you pull into your driveway, I hear so many people say, you know what? We don't even get home, and we're ready to kill each other again. We can't even make it home before we're fussing and fighting. We can't even make it home before the depression is back. We can't even make it home before the oppression is back. We can't even make it home before that is back. And I don't understand, when I was in the church, when I was at the altar, how can I go from 10 minutes earlier bawling at the altar? I would have accepted anyone, I love you, love you, love you, to you're a dead duck. How is that? I don't understand it. How can I 10 minutes earlier be bawling in the altar? And on the way home, I'm flipping somebody off because they cut me off. Why? Here's the thing. All week long, there's been prayer. I've spent hours in the sanctuary in prayer. We have prayer on Tuesday night. We have classes on Thursday. Everything is taking place. We've spent all week long cleansing the atmosphere so that a climate is created that attracts the presence of God. All week long, we've cleansed the atmosphere so that a climate is developed that attracts the presence of God. What happens is we've spent all week working on that. But when we go home, a lot of times our atmosphere hasn't been cleansed yet. And here's the deal. We step back into our own house, and there's curse words embedded in the atmosphere. There's violence and sex from the movies we're watching inventoried in the atmosphere. There's fights and accusations inventoried in the atmosphere. There's alcohol and pornography and bitterness and unforgiveness. The atmosphere is so filled with whiny and hateful Facebook posts and why me's and this and that inventoried in the atmosphere. You see, when we get home, we come under a new atmosphere. But the problem is that atmosphere changes our behavior. It changes who we are. Think about it this way. Most of the time you can look out and you can see someone who is living under an atmosphere of joy and happiness, or someone who is living under the atmosphere of Eeyore. When I was preparing the message, I just, not to call them out, but I'm going to call them out anyway, but I kept thinking, man, this is Rudy and Ernie. It's not that everything is rosy in their life all the time. Sister Ernie is a lot of times hurting. But when she walks into the room, it's like the atmosphere changes. You can't help but smile. You want to be around her. She attracts that. Why? Her atmosphere is joy, which created a climate that attracts the culture. Who is around here all the time is a culture of happiness. She's not hanging around with Eeyore. Why? Because her atmosphere has created a climate that attracts a culture. Somebody with me out there? You see, we all know someone whose culture always attracts drama and angst. We love them, but they're constantly draining us. The problem is their atmosphere has produced a culture that attracts a certain kind of. So what I'm saying is, change your atmosphere. It will eventually change your climate, which will attract a new culture. That is so good. Write that down. You say, what does that matter to me? I don't really care. Well, here's the other thing. Spiritual things are also attracted to an atmosphere and a climate. It will either attract the Spirit of God or the demons in hell. Look, sometimes when it feels like all hell is on your back continuously, most of the time it's the atmosphere that you're living under is a perfect playground for hell. You give them the atmosphere, and they'll play in it. Now, look, let's be honest. I know you're throwing up all those things, trying to play it in our mind. Well, everybody goes through hard times. Yes, they do. Everybody has trouble. Yes, they do. Is everybody's life rosy? No, it's not. But you and I both know the difference between going through a hard time than the devil messing up your marriage, playing pool in your attic. How can I go from the church loving God, bringing reconciliation to my marriage? I looked up and I saw him and I loved him, and then we got to the car and I hate him again. How? The atmosphere will either attract God's blessings and presence, peace and joy, or it will repel it. Atmosphere will either attract God's blessings, presence, peace, and joy, or repel it. Atmosphere will attract fussing and fighting, trouble or drama, or it will repel it. You know, so many people want to serve the Lord, want to live holy and pleasing lives, but under the right atmosphere, they feel depressed and angry and fussy and fighty, and they don't even know why they're angry anymore. There's an angst in the house. They wonder, have I sinned since I left church? No, you haven't sinned. You just haven't cleansed your atmosphere yet. You're living under the old atmosphere. You've been sending so much junk up into the atmosphere that it's created a climate that is attracting a culture. And I see people all the time, oh, bad stuff always happens to me. Well, a lot of times the bad stuff is happening to you because the culture that you are grabbing around you is not a good culture. Listen, leaders attract leaders and whiners attract whiners. Oh God, I can't believe I just said that. But you know what it is? Their atmosphere created a climate that attracts a culture. Most of the people that are down and out live a lifestyle of down and out. Everything about them is doom and gloom. How are you today? Well, you don't give. And you wonder, but there's an audience for that. Man, there's a down and out culture. Believe me, if you want to be Eeyore, I got plenty of people that will join you. And you can lick each other's wounds and you can pity party and you can call it whatever. But I'm here to tell you, you will live in it. If you want to live in that atmosphere and create that climate, you can have a good culture. Or you can rise above it. Create a different atmosphere. I hear it all the time. Look, I don't get it. When I walk into my house, I was so happy, and then all of a sudden it's like a cloud envelops me. I went from happy to angry. I went from happy to sad. I went from happy to depressed. I just don't know. Well, what are you sending into your atmosphere? Because what you're sending up into your atmosphere will create your climate. And it will attract a whole culture you don't like. What are you sending up? Please. Hear it all the time. Have I sinned? Please hear me. Until you deal with your culture, you're going to, until you deal with the atmosphere and change your culture, you're going to have to live what the culture produces. That's the way it is. If there's always fussing and fighting in your house, don't be shocked when your kids have an attitude. The climate and culture that you're attracting is going to be there. If you're living a rebellious lifestyle to God and you're like, don't be shocked when your kids are rebellious to you. If you're living in blatant sin and you know that you need to get it right, don't be shocked when your child misbehaves, because the atmosphere that you're producing will create a climate that will attract the culture. Hear me. Until you deal with it, you're going to have to live under it. See, I'm telling you something that I wish I would have known years ago. Because as a young pastor, I'd have people that would come to church and they'd come to the altar and get saved, you thought, and reconcile and bawl and cry. And everything was good, and you're like, oh, yes, been praying for, yes. And then about an hour later, you get a phone call that the police were called because they got into some domestic dispute. And you're like, how in the world? I just prayed with you, you numbskull. I saw you crying. Ah! What's the deal? Irritated, I bring it to God. God, whoa, it was this altar I prayed with them. What's the deal? They never changed their atmosphere. They lived in a lifestyle that kept sending things up, and they were reaping. They were watching things they shouldn't watch. They were listening to things they shouldn't hear. They were viewing things they shouldn't view. They were speaking in ways they shouldn't speak in. They were disrespecting one another. He was disrespecting her, and she was disrespecting him. And then they expected to reap peace. My house is in chaos. Crying at the altar is great. It's the starting place. But what happens here better transform over to your life. You better start changing your atmosphere, because I'm here to tell you that every house, every church, every person has a culture. Everyone. And you may not see your own culture, but everybody else does. You can look out and see the culture of the home. And a lot of times, listen, show me your friends, I'll show you your culture. Who you're hanging out with, how you're responding, how you're living, your joy, your peace, everything. It all goes back. Change your atmosphere. If you want peace and calm in your home, start sending up praise for one another. Start speaking gentle words. A gentle word turns away wrath. You start speaking into your atmosphere. This house belongs to the Lord. We're no longer going to watch that junk. We're no longer going to listen to that. We're no longer going to say that. We're not going to do that. We're going to change the atmosphere, because you start changing your atmosphere, your climate will eventually change, and your culture will go with it. You won't have to dump those old friends. They'll dump you. Because your climate will attract a different culture. We should have known that years ago. We attract who we are. But we change it by changing our atmosphere. So what am I telling you? Go home and begin to change your atmosphere. Take stock of your old wineskin. If you're looking for a breakthrough, if you want a marriage change, if you want a son and daughter change, if you want a whatever, if you want a personal change, start looking at what you're watching. Look, if you're constantly watching a soap opera drama where this person's yelling at that person and this person is that, you're going to reap it. You start looking at your atmosphere. You start changing it. This is the culture I want for my daughters. This is the culture I want for my son. This is how I'm going to develop that. Because if you don't change it, you'll constantly live under it. And you can keep coming to the altars. We'll keep praying with you. We'll keep whatever. But you'll be the same one. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. We've felt it. We've seen it. You come and you, oh God, man, there's something amazing about here. And as soon as you get back to your car, it's like the weight of the world has already been put back on your shoulders. And you wonder, what just happened here? I just praised the Lord. I just sang song. I was so happy 5 minutes ago. But now there's a heaviness here. I'm telling you. Spiritual things are attracted to atmosphere as well. Not just people, but attitude, persona. You can tell a home where mom and dad speak life into their kids, and their children are confident, and they know what they're going, and they're following God. It's like you can see it. Then you can also see where sometimes in a home where it's a little broken or missing a dad or whatever, and the daughter is out looking for love, looking for a man to love her, and she goes from this man to that man, and she never feels satisfied. She never really feels like she fits in. She's always looking for love. She's looking for something that she never got at home. She's looking for an atmosphere change of acceptance and love that her father should have stepped up and gave her. But he's either absent or he wasn't around. But I'm here to tell you, there's a new father, and his name is Jesus. So you can accept the new father and still change your atmosphere. So I don't care what father you grew up with, change the channel. Because the atmosphere that you choose to live under will develop your climate and will attract your culture. If you want to realize why you only attract losing or losers, check your atmosphere. When you realize you're worth something and your Father's the King of glory, you don't look in the garbage can for a spouse. My daughters are worthy of the best. And you better be on your tip-top game if you want to come ask for them. Because I'm going to run you through, you know what? I will vet you in every shape or form. Why? They're worthy of that. And I will fight to the death to make sure that they get what they're worthy of. Because that's my job. But you're also worthy of that because you're a child of God. You don't have to put up with the enemy messing in your marriage or your finances or your life. You don't have to put up with the enemy trying to steal the joy of your home or mess with your children. You don't have to put up with that. Start changing the atmosphere and start letting God work. Change your culture. From now on, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. That's not just a statement. That's the shows I watch, the music I listen to, what I read, what I do, how I speak. I can't say I love God as I'm cursing out my wife. It does not matter. If you can't treat your wife with respect, I challenge your love for your God. Because Jesus said, Lord, maybe I should leave it right there. I don't know. Woo! There you go. Someone's listening. Change your atmosphere. Change your atmosphere. Change your life.